Good morning. I'm sure this past long weekend looked and felt different for you and for perhaps most Manitoba families, even though it's not the way we're used to kicking off the unofficial start of summer. I hope that everyone was able to keep their connections with loved ones, from a safe distance, of course, or on FaceTime or over the phone for that matter. It is really important, as we're all hopeful this beautiful spring, to continue to follow the fundamentals so we can continue to be hopeful as we move forward. Practice good social distancing, hand wash, don't go to work and mingle with people when you're ill. Follow these fundamentals as we slowly and carefully restart our economy here in Manitoba and get our lives into a new normal, perhaps not the old normal, probably not for a long, long time, but a new normal and a better one where we get to enjoy the quality of life that Manitoba has to offer and the qualities that each Manitoban has to offer one another. While the vast majority of Manitobans have been following the public health guidelines, we know there are some people who just don't seem to get the message, and that is sad. Police and others involved in Operation Safe Apart, including Manitoba Justice staff, have issued approximately 100 warnings to enforce public health orders, and another 28 verbal warnings have been provided in our provincial parks as well. In all, police have handed out 16 tickets under public health orders, including 8 tickets for individuals traveling north of the 53rd parallel. I've said it before, but I'll say it again, all Manitobans need to continually work together by staying apart to help our COVID curve stay flat, out of respect for your neighbors, out of respect for your family, out of respect for yourself, for that matter. We want everyone to stay healthy so they can enjoy next May as well with all their friends and family. We know these have been challenging and uncertain times in Manitoba, but we are weathering the storm together. And I'm pleased to say today our plan to get people back to work safely is working. We've taken a steady, a measured, and a very safe approach to reopening our economy. Just last Friday, noted financial bond rating agency Standard & Poor's praised the contingencies that the Manitoba government had built into budget 2021, I should say. But they also recognized, and here they're talking about our setting aside some money in a rainy day fund and things like that to get ourselves prepared for what evidently we needed to be prepared for in the form of this pandemic. They also recognized what we already knew, that these contingencies are definitely not enough to withstand a global pandemic. Standard & Poor's said in their report last week that our debt will increase by approximately $3.5 billion. And we'll continue to share updates as we get the work done here in our Treasury Board department as to where we think the fiscal situation is going, but it is a dynamic and evolving one. Standard & Poor's also restated the fact again that Manitoba has the highest debt of any province, bar none. And I'll just quote from the report, quote, "The primary constraint on Manitoba's credit profile continues to be its debt burden, which remains the highest of any Canadian province. We forecast that Manitoba could issue more than $3.5 billion more debt than it had anticipated in its fiscal 2020-21 budget to finance the ballooning deficit." That's the end of the quote. But the Standard & Poor's report also instills a strong level of trust in our government, and they suggest that the economic repercussions of the pandemic will have a significant but temporary impact on Manitoba's budgetary performance. They expect the recovery rate in the next 2 years will be sufficient to allow us to resume a positive course on fiscal sustainability. And that's really important because this isn't just about today, as much as today is pressing for all of us. It is also about our future as a province and the future of our people, including our children and grandchildren. And so the decisions that we make today to work hard right now together will have ramifications for our ability to recover from these unprecedented times as we move forward. So far, our government has invested $1.2 billion in new measures to support our COVID-19 response. Our number one priority has been the health and well-being of Manitobans. We've invested very significantly in personal protective equipment to protect our frontline personnel. We prioritize childcare for our frontline health workers. We filled nearly 4,000 childcare spaces for the children of frontline workers in our province so that their parents could go to work to help keep the rest of us healthy. And I say again, thank you to our frontline workers. And while physical health is paramount, so too is our mental health. Many Manitobans are living with anxiety and stress posed by COVID-19. And our government invested $4.5 million into Ability BT, CBT, which is the program that offers in-home therapy and consulting services for those experiencing uncertainty or worry or having anxiety, so they can access this service free of charge. And we're pleased to report today that more than 2,000 individuals are already actively participating in the online therapy program guided by professional therapists. If you feel the need and feel that you would like those supports, you can sign up by visiting www.manitoba.ca/COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic has created difficulty for all Manitobans, especially our most vulnerable, including our senior citizens. And our senior generations built this province, and we owe them a great debt of gratitude for their hard work, their perseverance, and their commitment to making Manitoba the greatest province that it can be. Your government is providing $45 million in immediate direct support for all Manitoba seniors to lessen their financial burden caused by COVID-19, and we expect more than 200,000 seniors will be receiving those checks this month. For many Manitobans, getting back to work is very important, not only financially, but as a way to get back to the new normal and see their co-workers and friends again and customers of their stores and small businesses. We recognize this importance, and that's why thus far we've invested more than $400 million in supporting jobs and small businesses in our province. Our GAP program, the Manitoba Design GAP program, is providing our small businesses with a bridge to a stronger and better future as they work to reopen safely. And I'm proud to share with you today that more than 3,400 small businesses are receiving their funding of $6,000. This is the second most generous program, with Saskatchewan just up theirs, but the second most generous support program in the country. As well, over $20 million has already been made available to small businesses as they look to reopen on the road to recovery. And I thank our small business owners for their willingness to invest in Manitoba and to create jobs here. Through our Manitoba Economic Support Centre, we have placed more than 200,000 calls to businesses to help them become informed about the GAP program and other assistance available as well to them, such as our summer jobs programs. We want to do everything we can to make sure that Manitoba small businesses are well supported during these challenging times. As well, we're supporting high school and post-secondary students in finding employment in the private and non-profit sectors. And so far, under our Summer Student Job Recovery Program, we've identified over 600 employers for nearly 1,500 young Manitobans. And this represents over $7 million in provincial assistance, and we're ready to do more. And I encourage Manitoba young people to look for opportunities. We will be assisting with our program in supporting 50-50 with nonprofits, charitable organizations, and the small business sector, your employment over this coming summer. Manitoba employers should note that we are accepting applications for this program, and it is available at https://forms.gov.mb.ca/ssrip/. We've also been working hard to find ways to support Manitoba communities and municipalities throughout this crisis. And today, I am proud to announce another measure in our Manitoba Protection Plan. Your government is providing $10 million to community groups and municipalities under the Building Sustainable Communities Fund. We're increasing this year's fund by 25% in response to the incredible financial challenges created by COVID-19. We are investing in 344 projects all around Winnipeg and across the province to help provide a much-needed boost to community-based organizations and municipalities. And these projects range from playground upgrades to community building repairs to sports equipment to nature trails and many, many others. Your government's $10 million investment will lever an additional $18 million for a total of $28 million of investment for these projects through matching private and municipal contributions. Now, it's important that we up our game and support communities both big and small. This is important because in the private sector, they're hurting right now. And we know, because we've heard the StatsCan numbers, how shocking it is, the number of folks who've lost their jobs in Manitoba. We hope in the vast majority temporarily. And many, many more who have seen a drop in their hours and a drop in their wages. We've heard as many as 250,000 people may be impacted by the pandemic and its consequences. And so it's important that the government step in and assist where it can in these and other measures. And so we'll have more to report on that in the coming days. We are focusing in this particular announcement on local projects that are a priority to local residents. This investment will help support community organizations as well, many of whom are challenged during this pandemic. And the response and recovery phases of COVID-19 are going to be pursued by all of us to keep us on the road to recovery and help rebuild our economy. Cet investissement aidera à soutenir les groupes communautaires pendant la phase d'intervention et de rétablissement de la pandémie de COVID-19 et bâtir notre économie. Our government is pleased to support programs that help us build stronger and healthy communities. We want to see all our cities and towns thrive, obviously. So for generations, people have come here from all over the world to our Keystone province in search of a safer, more prosperous life for themselves and their families, and they found that life here in Manitoba. And we are the home of hope for many, many people from all over the world. And I see people making meaningful contributions all over our province in these last few weeks and months. They've done this, you have done this in good times, and more importantly right now, you're doing it in tough times too, so thank you to you. Le Manitoba est le foyer d'espoir depuis 150 ans, et nous continuerons d'être le foyer d'espoir. We're going to keep our COVID curve flat, and as we do, we will ensure that all of us and our loved ones have a healthy Manitoba today and for many generations to come. As I've said throughout these last challenging number of weeks and months, please stay positive, encourage one another, help each other. Send a note of thanks. I want to say thank you to all of those Manitobans who were so kind in response to the challenges my family's recently faced with the loss of my sister, and say to you, thank you for your thoughtfulness. Much appreciated. Together, we will beat this thing. I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. A reminder to our media online, you will have one preliminary question and one follow-up question. Up first this morning from CBC Manitoba, Ian.
Good morning, Ian Frey, CBC Manitoba. Premier, you mentioned that $1.2 billion has been poured into battling COVID-19 so far. How much of that money has gone towards PPE?
I think about half of that so far, Ian. We should be able to get you the more detail on that if you'd like a breakdown. I'd also use your question as an opportunity to say thank you to not only our civil service staff who've worked so hard on this very challenging series of issues in terms of procuring protective equipment, but also to the many Manitoba small businesses that have stepped up, and individuals too, who've stepped up to be part of helping us to become more self-sufficient during this period. As the whole globe has faced this challenge, our people have stepped up in Manitoba in a big way.
To follow up, Dr. Leeson has previously said that he wanted 2 full incubation periods, so about 4 weeks before moving forward with reopening the economy in next phases. It seems there's a plan to speed up that process. What has given you the confidence to move ahead with the economy restart earlier than perhaps June 1st?
Well, I'll let Dr. Roussin address the specifics of your question in a couple of hours' time. I'll just say that I think it would be fair to say Dr. Roussin and I have both been tremendously impressed. I hope, as have all Manitobans, in our ability to stand together in defense of each other through this process. And I think that any progress we've made is a reflection of that ability and willingness of Manitobans to step up and be part of the team and protect themselves and each other.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Steve Reinberg from the Canadian Press. Premier, the Standard & Poor's report you referenced in your opening remarks projects a deficit of about $1.8 billion this year. And again, that's the second one from, along with the RBC report that suggests the deficit, while still very large, could be much, much lower than the $5 billion you predicted. Have you revised your deficit numbers, and are we going to be able to see some financial information as to where the province, an updated picture as to where the province lies?
Yeah, actually, Steve, S&P predicts a $3.5 billion growth in the provincial debt, which isn't insignificant, but is somewhat less than we had feared early on. As I said to you early on, and I hope all the members of the media might remember this, we were in uncharted waters at that time, and so we hope to give you updates based on more charts that have been done. As actual expenditures and revenue impacts are being felt, we'll obviously be able to give you new numbers updated on the basis of reality.
And if the numbers continue like this, with this latest number in from Standard & Poor's, are you considering freeing up more money, offering more direct financial aid to people, or relaxing some of the spending restraints that you've imposed on public bodies, given the fact that the deficit may be much less than expected?
Well, nobody's projecting that we're going to be in anything but a desperate situation here, and that is the same of every province. We have significant increases in costs. We have significant declines in revenue, which means that Standard & Poor's just lowered their commentary on us from positive to stable. That's one step away from a credit rating downgrade, and that's very dangerous. We already spend hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion last year, on debt service costs, and I don't think any Manitoban fails to understand in their own home how dangerous it is to have too much debt and too many payments to make when your income's down. So I don't think we're out of the bush yet, I guess is the honest answer. But I do think that the preparatory work that our government's done with our rainy day fund established to give us that cushion has been helpful. And I do think that the measures we're taking now are common sense ones, balanced ones, to make sure that we're separating wants from needs. Right now, we're focused on keeping people safe, and we're going to stay focused on keeping people safe. That's our number one need. Wants will have to wait for another day.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Mr. Premier. Jeff Keel, CTV Winnipeg. Can you give us a day, I don't know if it's this week or next week, you're anticipating announcing Phase 2 reopening?
Tomorrow.
Okay, and since it's tomorrow, why not just share the date with us? June 1st, before June 1st?
I'll have more to say on that tomorrow, Jeff.
Thank you.
From City News, Stephanie.
Senior Stephanie with the City News. Just the extra $10 million in grants, has that money already been spoken for, or is there an opportunity for community groups to still apply for some of that money?
That application process began some months ago, and Stephanie, will find out. I know that we've expanded the budget, but I think that there were far more applications than we could approve earlier, and we decided through the ministry to expand the approval. So I don't think we'll need new applications. There's no shortage of them. I put these kinds of applications are in that category of, say, infrastructure applications that we get from municipalities. There's always more of them than you can possibly satisfy in any given year. But we are allocating millions of dollars more both for this program and, as I previously mentioned, for infrastructure, to help stimulate the recovery of our economy and to help our communities grow and to help get Manitobans back to work.
And when or how can we access a list of community projects that have been approved?
Yeah, we can check on that and see. Those should be made available to you, I think, later in the week or early next week at the latest. I think there's some notifications that still have to go out to let the specific applicants know before we put it out to the general public. So I wouldn't think it would take too many days to get you that information.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Carol.
Good morning, Premier. It's Carol Sanders at the Free Press. I'm wondering, have you set any deadline for getting checks out to essential service workers?
Oh, on the risk pay issue, Carol? Yeah.
Yeah, the federal wage top-up, yeah.
Right, yeah. No deadlines. What we had a preliminary meeting last week. I understand there's another discussion this week. The goal was to get input from whether public sector, whether unionized workers on the front line or non-unionized, either way, from their leadership. We got some initial perspectives, and we want to gather more to make sure that we're not, to make sure we're doing as good a job as possible, because as you know, the federal government allocated the money, and this is not a criticism. We're partnering with them. But they didn't allocate a criteria. So we're looking at what other provinces have done, and we're looking to get perspectives from all our groups. It's not an easy thing. I think everyone recognized that at the first discussion. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's an important thing to do, and we want to get it as close to right as we can.
And my follow-up question is, the opposition says you're not being accountable by not committing to any sitting days beyond May. Since you ultimately control whether the legislature sits, can you tell us if the House will sit beyond next Wednesday?
Well, I can tell you that I've been in opposition for half my public service career, and I understand the job of opposition parties is to do what the opposition is trying to do here now. That being said, we're focused in the middle of a pandemic on the recovery of our province, and we're also focused on being available in an appropriate manner and a safe manner here in the legislature and always to answer questions that the opposition and you and the media may have. We've endeavored to do that. I think we're in line with what most other provinces are doing, and I think we're in line very much with what the federal government's doing. We're going to have committees sitting through June, and our House leaders are negotiating on other possible avenues that the opposition can use to go further than that with their responsibilities.
From Global, Brittany.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. Wondering if you can speak a little bit about the workforce reduction strategy. We've seen it go on from 25% of all government workers possibly working 2 days a week and going on EI for the other 3, to looking at 10, 20, and 30% scenarios, to yesterday's memo of asking 6,200 civil servants to take 5 unpaid days. Why are we seeing such a ever-changing plan, ever-evolving plan?
Well, I guess, Brittany, I'd say that we have 250,000 Manitobans in the private sector that are impacted right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We have less work for a lot of our public servants than would normally be the case. If we had more than would normally be the case, we'd be expected to up our overtime and increase our bills. I think it's not unfair to look when you're seeing arguably 50% of the private sector is impacted here in a negative way. I don't think it's unfair to ask for 2% of the public sector to do something to assist. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to balance out the needs of today with tomorrow. I would emphasize, though, that we are the 3rd lowest impacted province in terms of our public sector in Canada. So we do not like layoffs. This is a government that has tried to keep people at work, and we think that some type of reduced work week for a brief time, perhaps 5 days, would be a reasonable thing to pursue so that we can keep everybody at work as much as possible.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if you can respond to some critics who have said that your government is using the pandemic to reduce the size of the civil service instead of, is hiding behind using the pandemic to reduce the size of civil service.
Well, I can only say that this isn't about layoffs. We have tried to make it about anything but, so I don't think that's a fair accusation. I think when you know that 7 other provinces have done more, including thousands of layoffs across the country, we're not pursuing that avenue, apart from, as I've mentioned, some liquor and lotteries employees because the casinos were closed. I don't think that's a very fair observation. I think what we try to do here and what we are doing is engaging in a very reasonable practice of protecting not just today and our best interests today in terms of the impacts of COVID, but our long-term interests as a province so that we can come back, so we can lead the country in recovering. That's what our goal is as people in Manitoba, to get back to an active economy and an active public service. So I don't think a 2% contribution is too much to ask.
From the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. It's Drew May from the Brandon Sun here. With regard to the announcement today on the Building Sustainable Community Fund, was the decision to increase funding, was that made as a direct result of the pandemic, or was that made before the pandemic started?
It was made as a direct result of the pandemic, as were a number of other decisions, Drew, in terms of beefing up our programs and investments, whether it's in scholarship programs, infrastructure, the mental health programs, support for seniors, support for the homeless, tenants. We've adopted dozens, literally dozens of new policies in response to the pandemic to help Manitoba recover. And we're going to continue to do that as is necessary so we can make sure that we come out of this COVID experience robust and resilient here in Manitoba.
Thank you. And I know it's still pretty early days, but would you anticipate that this funding boost would stay in place in future years?
No, it's a one-time thing, and then we'll review every one of these programs in the coming year. Our hope would be that we can recover. We believe that there are good signs, cautious signs of recovery right now, and we believe that this is a province that can lead in that comeback. And if that's the case, then we have to get back on track. As Standard & Poor's said, we have to remember that we have the highest debt in the country, and we can't ignore that reality. So spending our way out of a problem, yeah, we're going to be borrowing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars more than we had anticipated 3 months ago. But the fact remains, we're not throwing money at the problem. We're investing in solutions to the problem. There's a big difference in those two approaches.
From CJOB, Diana.
Diana from 680 CJOB. Mr. Premier, economic development in Winnipeg has touted the city as a perfect place to be an NHL hub as the league plans to continue the 2019-2020 season and playoffs. You've been very bullish on reopening Manitoba. What would you add to Winnipeg being kind of the place for one of these NHL hubs? Are you advocating on behalf of the Jets? Have you been asked to help? What do you know about any kind of proposal?
Well, I've just had some preliminary discussions with Dana Spiring across the way at Economic Development Winnipeg. I have offered to do whatever I can to assist. I can only say that with the proper social distancing and obviously the protections in place, it is something that Manitoba offers that perhaps most other NHL centers do not offer, relative safety. We'd have to be sure that it fits in with Dr. Roussen's directives, though, because we are taking his lead. We're taking the lead of our medical health officials. But that being said, it's an intriguing topic to discuss for sure.
And then as a follow-up, I know we saw a lot of detail on what phase one of the reopening plan would look like prior to its start date. Some groups are listed as being in kind of future phases. They're wondering if they may be moved up and seen for gyms, for example. Will there be many kind of revisions or additions to what we're seeing for phase two right now when you make that further announcement tomorrow? Can you kind of give us a sense of whether tomorrow is just going to be a date for when phase two is happening, or will we have sort of more services and more businesses included in what we're going to see in phase two?
Well, I'll have to take the fifth, as they say, and tell you that tomorrow, but I will say this: the preparatory work that's gone on has been onerous. It's involved many, many people. We have had regular calls with our business associations like our Chambers of Commerce, the various trade associations. In fact, over 50 different groups represented in those regular calls at least twice a week. And so the preparatory work on this, plus the support work that all of us are doing by adhering to the fundamentals, is what makes any expansion or easing of the rules around these restrictions possible. And so again, I say thank you to Manitobans who have helped so much in this, and to all those who've been directly involved in providing their government with input, so that we make, without any precedents being available to us, that we make the best possible decisions as we move forward to protect our folks, not just from a health standpoint, but to protect Manitobans from an economic standpoint as we move to help people get back to work and get back on with their lives.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. This is Josh Aldridge from the Winnipeg Sun. We're hearing from more and more residential property owners and the issues that they're having that tenants are taking advantage of the opportunity or the rent deferral program, whether or not they can afford to pay rent. And I suppose they're losing thousands of dollars. Is there the potential for the reopening of the residential tenancy board, or is there going to be another program to provide protection for property owners against this type of situation, or to help them just get through the pandemic until things reopen and programs like CRB expire?
Yeah, you raise a good question, Josh. There's federal programs out there like the CERB, we call it, that may or may not expire at the end of June. That's going to have an impact on some of our tenants, obviously. This is one reason why we have the ongoing calls with the Prime Minister that we have every week. Deputy Prime Minister is often involved in those calls directly as well. And we have also weekly calls with all the other premiers. This is an issue that is important, and it's one that has been discussed on those calls. So there are a lot of things that are still on the table. We're not through this thing yet, and we're going to have to continue to look at protecting our most vulnerable citizens. We've taken steps to do that already, and I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that there may be more to do.
And this is a follow-up to some previous questions. We're hearing more and more rumors that the province is refusing to sign off on the 4-month temporary layoffs. I was hoping you'd be able to respond to that, as well as why you feel the need to reduce public sector workforce just because the private sector workforce has seen a pretty big reduction.
Well, two things. The need is made evident by the lack of work, and the work that our public sector does is, to no small degree, influenced by the health of the private sector. The private sector is sick. When somebody in your family is sick, you don't just stand back, do nothing. You step up and do your part. We're asking the public sector that isn't as fully engaged as it normally would be to do 2% to assist. By saving that money, A, we don't take it from our kids and grandkids or us when we're older, but B, we make those funds available to assist us in beefing up our front line, or facing the next flood, or facing the next fire, or facing the next pandemic. It's about being resilient and strong. As Manitobans know, we inherited a mess as a government. We've been working very, very hard together as people to clean it up. We just got up off the mat. Now we've got a pandemic. We're not going to forget about the fundamentals in the midst of this pandemic. We're going to do the right things, not just for today, but for tomorrow as well. I just want to wish the very best to Kelsey Ray, my good friend who has just gone through her 3rd major surgery, and say, we're with you, girl. You're going to come through this, and you're going to be great and strong at the end of it. So I want to say all the best to you. You're a beautiful person, and I know Manitobans are cheering for you. All the best. Thanks, everybody. We'll beat this thing.